I'm going to share with you 6 tips on entrepreneurship based on my experiences on the Guatematic. The Guatematic is a machine for cooking sadza automatically. I invented it some years back and my business is based on it. The first tip is make sure there is a gap in the market. There has to be someone in the market who is prepared to pay for your product. If that isn't there, your chances of success are very limited. For me, I spotted the gap in the market in my student days. I was a student of biochemistry and I was posted to a hospital laboratory for my attachment year. And on arrival at the hospital, one thing that really struck me was that there was no test tubes in the laboratory. Whereas at university, we'd been trained to do the chemistry using test tubes. What I eventually found is that the laboratory was quite automated. Everything was pipetted into carousels and then you shove them into machines and the machines whiff and puff away and then print the results. Apart from the labor saving, one of the major things that impressed me was the reproducibility of the results. If the sample had not deteriorated, it didn't matter how many times you made the measurement. Say you're measuring calcium in the blood. If you measured it 100 times, you got the same result 100 times. Unlike in the laboratory, where we were doing it by hand, if you measured something more than once, the chances are you got more than one answer. Sure, they were all clustered around a certain average, but they were different answers. Whereas with the automated machines, for as long as your sample is not deteriorated, you continue to get the same result. That was very impressive, especially for a student who was bent on passing exams. So I looked further behind those automated machines and discovered that the secret was electronic discipline. Electronic discipline to control the process. Suddenly, that's when I thought, cooking is a form of chemistry. In fact, if we consider the volumes that are processed through cooking worldwide every day, it's a much more important form of chemistry than laboratory chemistry. Yet, there wasn't any such electronic disciplines in the kitchen. That is when I spawned the idea of a Guatematic, and sadza was the first target dish. If there is no market that is willing to pay for your invention, then it can only be a hobby, it won't be a business. The second tip is passion. You need passion in whatever you're doing. Without passion, it will be very difficult to persevere and to continue to success. And in fact, even with the passion, only a minority of new ventures ever make it to fruition. So don't forget, passion is very important. The third tip is look out for opportunities for leverage. They come in many forms, but they have one thing in common. They are barriers that exclude the competition. In other words, barriers that you can scale yourself, but the competition would find it difficult to scale too. They could be secret recipes, specialist expertise, or secret formulas, or unique processes. For me, the opportunity for leverage came in intellectual property in the form of the Guatematic patent. The fourth tip is make sure you have an ability to persevere. It takes perseverance for anything worthwhile. Every project has got something called the gestation period. And the gestation period is the time period between the first inception of an idea and the date when there are positive cash flows coming from the business. That varies from project to project. And it is there. No matter how bright you are, you won't be able to circumvent that. So always make sure you have the capacity to persevere. Perseverance is more than just a state of the mind. It could also be financial provision during the time when there are no cash flows. For instance, no matter how determined you are, You still need to eat, you still need to travel, you still need clothes during the time when you are still waiting for positive cash flows coming from the business. In my case, I was fortunate enough to have a consultancy arrangement with my last employer, National Foods, where I went in to work mornings only, and then in the afternoons I would work on my project. So it's advisable to try to work for someone first before you launch into your own self-employment. The fifth tip is to make sure there is adequate financing provision. It goes without saying that to start any business, some money has got to be input first. That cannot be avoided, but what you can do is to minimize the amount of money required. I tried to minimize the amount of money required for building my prototype by using scrap metal and home industries welders to produce this prototype. That, believe it or not, was the prototype that successfully demonstrated that sadza could be cooked by machine. After that success, I was confronted with an even bigger financial challenge of tooling in order to produce production models of the machine. The only funds I had at my disposal were the refund from the National Food Staff Pension Scheme. That was all of $52,000. That was Zim dollars, not even US dollars. I went to collect that, and I was still at a loss at how I could actually make this project a reality with so little money. The funds available to me were not enough to buy even a drill press, yet I needed machine tools to make some of the components. Then I stumbled upon an article in the Harvard Business Review that was focusing on how IBM were making personal computers. IBM was still making PCs at that stage. And there was no single building you could point at to say that is where IBM computers are made. What IBM did was design a computer that they wanted. Then they take drawings for the mouse. They go to someone in Taiwan and say, please make a mouse like this. They take drawings for the processor. They go to California. They say to somebody, please make a processor for us like this. And then they take the drawings for the screen and take it to yet another subcontractor to make. And when they are all finished, they ship it to one central location where it's assembled, and they put a sticker on the computer which says IBM, and they put it in an IBM cardboard box and it's shipped to the seller. That way, a machine was actually built without IBM spending any money on tooling, but basically just using subcontractors. As soon as I read that, I realized that was the method for me. And I'm glad to say I successfully made the first few sadza machines that way. After a while, I reached a point where I could afford modest machine tools of my own, but I didn't buy them. It was not necessary. The subcontracting way was still working very well. And to this day, there are 14 subcontractors who make components to build a single Guatematic machine. Here is a sample of the activities that are subcontracted.
Ese es el
need for business management expertise to pull it all together and actually produce a product that is sellable and bring some money in. There are a few ways of dealing with that one. The first is that the expertise doesn't have to be with you. You could actually hire somebody who does it for you. But for a new startup, that's not always too practical, because generally you have no money when you get started. The other option is to work for someone else first and observe how they run their business. And from that, you can pick up a few ideas to run your own as well. And then thirdly, you could go to study business management as a discipline and then take it from there. I went with the third option. I joined a firm of accountants and served articles of clerkship and studied for an accountancy degree with the University of South Africa in the process. And 10 years later, I was ready to leave and to go and start my own business. To sum up, I'm going to re-list the 6 tips that I've just shared with you. The first was make sure there's a gap in the market. Second, choose something that you are passionate about. Third, look out for opportunities for leverage. Fourth, make sure you have the ability and the capacity to persevere. Fifth, you need some financing provision. Sixth, you need some business management expertise. I hope that helps.